Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop-In CEO, and I am so grateful you've joined us on another episode where week after week I am introduced to the most amazing people who bring their insights to you and hopefully inspire you. And if you love this episode, and I know you will, please subscribe, download, rate, review, but most importantly, tell others so they can leverage this great resource. And you know me, I am here. I'm here always to elevate and support the C suite leader of today and tomorrow to navigate their challenges and hopefully opportunities with great confidence. And I am so grateful for the network of meeting Shelly Stark, who is a pillar in coaching and business advising with an impressive tenure of over 20 years in both extended disc coaching and business advising. Shelly has been an instrumental force for communications coaching in the business community and is passionate about helping businesses find their ROI, investing in their people. It sings to my heart. Shelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so a big shout out to Nanu Bansi, who was thinking of us. He thought he had met me. He's been on the show and he knew Shelly. And we always love connectors. And he says, you got to meet Shelly. And we had an amazing conversation as part of networking. And I said, I've got to bring her backstory and her onto the show. You're going to be inspired by her work. So grateful to have you here. But I will give you the floor and share a bit about yourself personally, as well as how have you arrived at this work.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. I actually have, like you said in my bio, been a communications coach of some sort for over 20 years, in and out. This is my third consulting business, inline consulting services that I just launched. And I am so excited because I got fueled through an experience a couple of years ago in October of 2022. I went through a health situation, a radical hysterectomy that caused me to really pay attention to kind of the things that were really important. I was working in a corporate role. I was good at it. I was making good money, but it wasn't something that was really, firing me up during every day and giving me that passion that I wanted to feel. And so I kind of went on a little bit of a journey. And the journey was to get a hold of a career coach, a friend of mine, and asked her if I can go through her 90-day program and really just see where the things are through her assessments and tools that I could find what my actual passions were and what I really wanted to do. I think deep down we always know what those are, but sometimes we have a little bit of a fear as to stepping out on our own and doing our own thing, and not kind of staying in that linear path. And I think that a lot of executive leaders can, appreciate that statement because you're challenged, and it's almost like you get all the extra gets burned off, right? And what's left is that core you and being able to offer some of these amazing, nuggets that you learn along the way. And so through that process, I found I really do want to be able to go out and help people communicate better. I want them to have the ability to have some tools that changes the dynamic with not only their staff or with their teams, but this kind of extends even past that into their personal life. And I find that to be fascinating when I hear people say, Shelly, I took what you taught us in our training, and I used it with my family. That just really, really gives me almost like it's an icing on the cake, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things where I'm so thankful that I had to go through that, even though it's hard to look back and say that was probably one of the hardest times of my life to deal with all that physical stuff. It just helped me get on this journey of, okay, this is where I really need to be. And these are the people that I really want to impact.
Hmm. And thank you for sharing, your personal story. But, what I think about that is you did have a major life event that gave you time to reflect on what was next. But I wonder how many people that without a life event just continue to progress in that linear path without having that aha moment. I mean, what would you say to them? Because I think there's so many people that have so much more to give. Let's not wait for an acute situation, but take control of your life. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think it's really important to kind of feel that gut feeling. It's one of those things where you're like, gosh, does this light me up when I get up in the morning? Do I want to do this for the rest of my career? And those are scary questions because sometimes you don't want to know the answer, right? Because then that would require you to change. And not only that, but it would require you to do more work internally to find what that is and kind of spend the time even with your family to say, this is the path that I'm going to take, and this is going to change us a little bit, but here's my plan. Here's what I'm planning to do with it. And you'd be surprised the people that get behind you whenever you kind of live in an authentic space of where you need to be, the path you need to be going on. I always think about like a river, right? And if you get in flow in that river and it's easy and it kind of just takes you along that path, as opposed to you going opposite the river and trying so hard to climb this ladder in a role that maybe doesn't really serve you. I mean, you might be burned out, and you're like, why do I get up and do this every single day? you know?
Yeah, and just to lean into that, there is a person that kind of earlier in the drop-in CEO brand, I coached them. I didn't even know what my value was. So I kind of gave this offer and gave them hours and hours and hours of help. But this person, I really care about them. They were continuing to pursue big titles, big companies. And yes, the money was good, but they were getting so burnt out and just not passionate. Everything was becoming a disappointment. And they were just making potentially wrong decisions about their career. Now, I don't know their current situation, but they have recently come back to me and said, I'm staying true to my guideposts, certain amount of commuting time max. I'm not necessarily going for the big company, but some companies that really value me. And you see inspiring content being pushed out on LinkedIn and trying to elevate others, just knowing that you do have an alternate path. Don't be controlled by the world around you. And even if you can't leave that situation, you can always take small incremental steps to move you to where you need to be.
Absolutely. And not only that, but whenever you start making this mindset shift, like
Yeah.
when you start really saying, okay, listen, I'm gonna bet on me. That's what I had to do. It was like full bet on me. I've been in corporations for on and off for 20 years, come in, go out, come in, go out. There's one thing that's always consistent. They don't bet on me. They only have their interest at heart. And even though I've worked for some good companies, that's their objective. They need to make sure they're protecting and holding their line, right? But as an individual, my job is to represent that company, but it's to protect my interests and it's to protect my line. And sometimes we forget that. And sometimes we just want to be, doers and be the always have that best foot forward that we think everybody wants to see us do, like climb that ladder. And if that's not really what resonates with you, it's always going to feel like it doesn't fit. It feels like a square peg trying to go in a round hole, and you're going to keep doing it over and over and over. And I can say this because that was me. I finally just had that event, that life event that caused me to go, what am I doing? Do I really, really love what I do? No. Am I good at it? Yes. But just because I am good at something doesn't mean I should do it.
So that was probably one of the best sound bites I've had or heard about betting on yourself. And
Thank you.
and it's such a strong point. And by the way, these are going to come out on YouTube and you're going to get those snippets. It's such a strong soundbite because yes, we want to serve others. We want to serve the greater good. If the company has a great purpose, we want to help society, sustainability, help consumers, etc. But at the end of the day, there has to be a component of self-service as well. Um,
We've heard about it for a long time, Deb, that
yeah.
you can't pour out of an empty vessel. And women in general, especially professional women, I find a lot that they tend to take on a lot, a lot too. That is like, I've got all the family, I've got all the work, I've got, and they don't necessarily pour into them because that's not what our innate, thing is. It's not like what we want to go and do and think of it being just about us. But the older that I get, the more I understand how important that whole self nurturing piece is.
Yes.
And it's not because I need to be better for them. It's because I need to be better for me.
And then you'll be better for them.
And then I will be better for them. But the goal is not to just do it to be better for them.
All right, I know we could probably go down this rabbit hole for a while, but let's come back a little bit to you. You talked about being a communications coach. Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and maybe what are some of the pitfalls for which you drop in and help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times the people that contact me, it's usually in the professional services world because those tend to be more focused on culture and have, the resources to want to pour that into. And then if their people are staying a little bit longer, they want to make sure that they're, pouring into their people as well. So they keep good people, or even attract good people, right? From my perspective, I come in, I have a very simple, high level, three-part series called Connect, Communicate, Grow. We assess all of the people. I meet with the executive leadership team. We talk about some of the downfalls that are happening internally for them. I don't come in and just do a presentation on the type of, just the assessment and then explaining this. I got to put it in their world because if it's a doctor's office, I need to talk about what it sounds like in a conversation when you've got a front of the office and the back of the office, team interacting with the doctor. We need to have these very specific conversations. Otherwise, they're not going to make the connection. So my job is try to come in and make that connection, give examples after having talked to the leadership, team. Give me some examples of what is happening internally where we have some breakdowns. And then I use that as part of the baked in tool for that second session so that they start to really connect it, like connecting those dots. Oh gosh, that does happen when that guy walks in as a receptionist and he just totally rips my head off. I need to have some kind of way to diffuse that conversation and make sure that we're still moving that along because somebody else is standing right behind him. That's her world or his world. But if I just start talking about, well, if you hear something like this and you need to diffuse it, here's a couple ways to do that. It doesn't have the same impact, if you know what I mean. And then the third session is once we really get that good as a team internally and we start putting some tips or some tools in place so that they can repeat that every day in their internal conversations, then we look at how can we adjust this and switch this to our client or our customer, understanding behavioral styles, finding out what that style is in front of you that you're talking to, framing the conversation so they feel more comfortable and they put their defensive gates down. I mean, if you can imagine, that raises the emotional intelligence level, if only for just that 1 minute. It doesn't need to happen on a regular basis, like, every conversation. But if you're doing that with clients, they feel heard, they feel understood, they feel like you care. And that's all that really matters. I mean, they're going through their day every day, multiple things that they're experiencing. But when someone takes the time to really hear them, they're going to remember that. They're going to refer you to people and they're going to want to come back and even have more services from you.
What I really love about your approach, and this is something that people need to internalize, is so often we're celebrated, but here's my PowerPoint. Here are my 3 points. This is what's worked. And then there's crickets. It's because they fail to make that human connection. You do that and you put it in their words. I'll do something similar. I'll listen deeply and maybe reframe what I heard to validate that I understood them. It's this beautiful technique that communication is two directions. It's not disseminating information, but understanding the human you're interacting with and being able to come back with, in your case, their specific language. It's like this middleware. It is this most amazing vehicle to build trust, show that you care. And that is a key thing that I think a lot of leaders need to develop, is not just disseminating information, but just building trust and connection. And it's an art form. It's not that hard. It's a few changes, but it's so critical.
It is critical. And if you can just take even just a small example, like you've got a director or an executive that is a super direct person, or maybe they're very task oriented, but their support staff is people oriented, which is what they want in that role, right?
Yeah.
They literally can soften the conversation with them instead of walking up and saying, Deb, here are the 5 things that I need to get done today. Deb might need to hear, hey, Deb, how was your weekend? It doesn't need to be a 5-minute conversation,
Yeah.
but if that really helps soften that whole interaction for her, she puts those defensive gates down, doesn't immediately go to her defensive back of her brain for fight or flight. She stays in the front of her brain and she wants to actually have a conversation and figure out what it is that she needs to complete for you. Her ideas and the things she's going to bring to the table are going to be way more impactful than if she's in fight or flight mode. Fight or flight, she's just going to go and do the task. If you get her into the frontal lobe, it's a reasoning part of her brain, she's going to be more creative. And she's going to say, hey, this is what I can do to pour into this company. And that executive is going to get more from her.
Yeah, very, very valid. Another soundbite because I too, again, engineer, technical mind, celebrated for getting results, work, work, work.
Yeah,
And it's all about the agenda and the activity, but it's more about the relationship. And once you have that relationship, that trust, the appreciation for the individual value, when you have a task, when you have to go into crisis or urgency, they will have your back. They will perform. And the
great.
other thing that I really like about what you're talking about is that once the people are whole, the relationships are there and they know how to communicate in a way that gets them the best performance. External customers are going to feel it because if they're always in that fight or flight mode, and they had a bad day, they can't get all those tasks done, your customers are going to feel that, and that loses
Absolutely.
money.
Absolutely. And this is the part that I think COVID helped people understand more, right? We went all virtual and we weren't in person. And there's this element that, and I'm not talking old school, I'm just saying element of the human connection that happens. And we forget, like, we can sense things on a video, but when you're in person, your senses are way more heightened about everything, their body language, their eyes shifting, their hand movements, the tonality that they have. You just have a more full body experience that's happening in front of you. And when you're radiating whatever that tension is, no matter what's coming out of your mouth, they're absolutely going to feel that. And if they don't, they can't maybe put words to what that is, but they might leave there going, gosh, that was such a stressful experience. I don't even know why, but I don't really want to go back there. Or that overwhelmed me. And I don't
Yeah.
feel like I need to have that in my life again very often.
So these are great points. And again, this show is about you, but I could go on and on of being that high achiever. And I show that face at work. And then I would come home and, oh my God, I got to do the dishes. I got to make dinner. And I don't even take time to pause. I would love for you to share a bit about how these same principles can help in your personal life.
I would love to. In fact, I'm in the middle of writing a book right now about my blended family. So I have children who are 6 months apart. We got together when they were early teenage girls, both of them. In fact, one of them is getting married next month, which is very exciting.
Yes.
But they literally, when you look at this dynamic, the book is going to explain the dynamic of my family. So you've got two teenage girls, you've got normal teenage hormones, girl hormones. You've got their only children up until this early teen years, so they have to learn to share a bathroom, which is it should be stated because it is a big deal. They also they also have the most opposite behavioral style on the chart, literally plotted on the chart that they could be. One is very, very detail oriented, has to have everything in a specific way. The other one is that all who are lost or all who are wander are not lost child. She is the one that is all about the immediate experiences, and her room's not it's not the best put together, but the other one's like military. So they're literally as opposite as they could be. Well, one of the things that I noticed was that we were just having all this dynamic, plus we're blended families, so they've got other parents in the mix, right? And that whole dynamic of what's going on. And so I remember a couple of years in, I just thought, oh my gosh, I need to make my family my client because we're not communicating. It is miserable. Everyone's miserable. And I don't want that because I feel like we have a really great dynamic, but we've got all these other things in the mix, right? And they're not a fully developed frontal lobe, so I can't expect them to understand, as teenagers, how to bridge that gap for that communication. So I was like, all right, family, we're sitting down and we're going to do this. And I will tell you, I'm going to fill this book with examples of the things that happen, the communication that happened in my home, and how I was able to use extended disc to explain to them the differences between their behavioral styles and why they do what they do. And then I'm going to take those same examples, and each one of my girls are going to write a chapter on their version of those stories, because I found that their version of those stories was very different than the adult version of those stories. And I think it's going to be important for family dynamics to understand this is what is going on in that that child's mind or that teenager's mind, and just be able to give the reader kind of the grace to know that you've done the absolute best that you can, right? As a single parent and as a blended parent, and then give them the opportunity to identify their families in there. And I'm going to open the book by writing a letter to myself as the single mom that I was, because I carried a lot of guilt over the years for a lot of things. And I found in reliving some of those stories, at my daughter's version of those stories was so different, and it wasn't anywhere close to what I was dealing with. And so I'm going to give the reader an opportunity to write themselves a letter in the back of that book. And so now, as they're adult children, they say to me, Mom, I use this every single day. Why don't they teach this in school? And I mean, for my adult children to make a point to tell me that means it has really impacted their world.
Oh
And
my
that,
God.
to me, that is what fueled me to launch this communications, business. I have been a coach of all kinds of things. I mean, conflict resolution, sales training, leadership training, recruiting. I've done all the things. And what I've found is that the thing that lights me up the most is communication, because we're really, really needing that as a civilization.
I got so many thoughts running through my mind here. So as a podcast host, I have to be patient. Let my guests go through their thoughts, not jump in, not interrupt. But oh my God, I mean, oh my, the education system is a tough nut to crack.
I know.
But we're still living in an archaic system by reading and memorization. They're finally getting with the program and starting to have classes that are more collaborative and team building, but we should be having more integrated into our educational system on appropriate communication. Boom, off my soapbox. But one other thing.
Agreed.
Yeah. But you talk about the blended family and bringing them together, for one to understand, try to find ways of working, and all of that. Same thing goes for business. You
It does.
sometimes come into new teams, mergers, acquisitions. Somebody was fired. So guess what? You got 20 more people to you. We need to take the time to understand the perspective, because it is quite different from how you see the world. And I'm going to stop there because it's important to talk to family members or others. Like, how do you see things? Got to
Yeah.
get that feedback.
I know. And one of the things I love, Deb, is I went and watched a couple of your other episodes, is that you ask what I consider to be the magical type of question, which is an open-ended question. And I point this out because when we're talking about communication, if you ask someone a yes or no question, they're going to give you a yes or no answer. You're not expecting, maybe if you're expecting them to give you more information in that yes or no, you've set it up that way. So asking an open-ended question, and sometimes even a pendulum question where you're asking this or this, then they have to answer something in between, and it gives them an opportunity to share their feelings or share their insights. And sometimes certain behavioral styles are more internal processors. So we oftentimes as a society think, well, they don't have anything to say. That's not true. They do. And it's just sometimes not the way that out in the room processors offer that information. And so as a communication coach, my job is to teach them questions to help them get that information out of even an internal processor, which, by the way, takes up about, I don't know, 48% of the population, roughly. So if you're not doing these open-ended questions, you're missing 48% of your staff, and knowing what their ideas are or what they could contribute or even offer that is not being asked.
So right now I'm working with a product development client, super, super, super smart people. They're all internal processors, but some people speak up more than others. But a question about, well, how do you feel about this proposal? And direct it to a particular person. Sometimes people want to be called upon, and asking how they feel could be a good entry point while they process maybe technically why they are or are not in favor. Um, yeah, it's an art form as well, because at the end of the day, you may have the people that are most outspoken sway or bias the outcome of what we're doing. We as leaders need to make sure it's unbiased and make sure everybody has an opportunity to be on the stage.
And sometimes that,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that means you pull them aside separately and not in a big group because they might feel more comfortable, not as stressed to have to communicate out in that group, or even send out an email asking for feedback because a very detail oriented person might take 30 minutes to write an email to you that's like 2 paragraphs long. Just be ready for whatever it is that you asked for. But you will get some insights to that person, and that they may not have offered to you in a group setting or even in person to one another.
Our purpose as leaders is not to be the one always speaking, but to be in service and bring forth the ideas and thoughts of others. And I love your work. I do have to ask you just one more question before we bring it to a close. I get what you do. You are, first of all, so important, the service that you provide. That's why you are, with me today on the Drop-In CEO. But would love to know an example. Again, you shared a personal family experience where you've applied this kind of work. But how about in a business setting, whether in your previous corporate life or even with a client now, how have you been able to transform either an individual or team because of your coaching?
So I love using this story. I had a veterinary clinic that I came in to work with them and their team there at a teaching hospital, which means they have students. So that we have the age demographic is pretty drastic from the student age, right, to
Mhm.
even the doctor's age or even some of the supporting staff being a
Yeah.
little bit older. So we've got this really large demographic in there. And not only that, but you've got younger people again who don't have that frontal lobe. And so you kind of sometimes are expecting things from them. It's almost like when you have a German Shepherd that like all of a sudden looks like an adult dog, but it's actually not an adult dog. It's still a puppy and it's acting like a puppy. And you're like, I don't understand why this is happening. So some of the dynamics that I don't always provide for every client, I was able to share some of these things with those doctors or those veterinary doctors to talk about, let's try to find some ways where you can utilize the student body in one certain area, utilize the support staff in another, and then utilize the doctors to lead different teams so that you can actually access every single, it's a very large practice. One head veterinarian is not going to be able to access every single person in there, but her entire business is built on heart first business. And she wants to actually get that dynamic coming out in every single one of them so that it pours into their actual clients, right? And the hard part is that she can't get to every single one of them and spend that kind of time. So I said, well, we need to start with the end in mind. I think I've heard you say that before. We need to start with the end in mind. We need to figure out and work our way backwards to how we touch every single one of those students and every single one of those employees. So we put together some different rule or different tools in place to utilize the system that they use for keeping track of their clients and using that for not only internal but external communication, letting us know, okay, this person came in and I'm pretty sure this was a D style in the disc, right? And then maybe a couple of notes in there so that whoever goes in and meets them, it could be another doctor, can look at that and say, oh, I need to have a conversation in the D style frame. So now we're not trying to figure it out because remember, this is like a very fast paced environment where they'll see 15 to 20 patients in every room and there are 10 rooms. So you've got to think about how much volume is going through there. How do we make sure that everyone feels heard and understood? But then also that the staff, the students and the staff are learning a tool or a technique that they need to be using every single day with every single client or internally together. And so we were able to put a nice system or process in place for them that they're able to, kind of do this every single day. And then there are small team leads that we put in place so that they can check in and say, hey, how did you do with your, learning your or doing your extended disc today? Did you get that on every single record that came in today? Or did you have a chance to communicate with your team member over here? How did that go using your extended disc knowledge? And that way we're getting small little checkpoints. And then when I come back after that 3-part series and do quarterly refresher courses, we just kind of check in to see how we're using our techniques and can we find them or refine them so that they're utilizing it.
So as I'm listening to you, it's very much focused, like I said, the end in mind or the outcome of being a heart centric, customer first entity. they run by leading indicators. It's not, did we send out a customer satisfaction survey? Did they return as a customer? Those are all lagging indicators. But one could use the ability, like how good were you at scoring against this particular DISC survey? And maybe that's an opportunity for improvement. If maybe a higher person says, oh no, they're really actually this style, you got an instantaneous feedback mechanism. And the more percentage that you can achieve establishing a relationship index, it then creates this experience throughout the entire practice. It's amazing, that kind of work. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do think that, even letting the leadership know that I don't make it, it can be an iceberg conversation. There's a lot of psychology that goes into all of this, but it doesn't need to be difficult and it can be easily consumable. And even one of the tools that I leave for leaders is a one pager on your entire staff. It gives you one or two sentences on how to communicate with them. So every time that you have a meeting or you need to call somebody in your office, you take a quick peek at that. It's your little cliff note on how to communicate with them. I promise you, I just see drastic results from the leaders that take the time, 5 seconds, just read that one sentence, help frame that conversation, and the results turn into ROI in so many different areas.
Such an amazing conversation, Shelly, and I'm so grateful for the network, other super connectors. We didn't even get into your connecting, but you are a super connector. I am so glad that we were connected here and being able to bring your insights and hopefully inspire a few people listening. So I'm going to give you the floor one last time as we bring this to a close. This will not be the end of this relationship, just the beginning, but give you the floor one last time.
Well, Deb, thank you so much for having me. I think the work that you're doing and helping support leaders, I think it can be a very lonely road at the top. And really hard for people to feel like other people are experiencing the same type of thing within their staff or within their team. And so this type of a podcast gives them an opportunity to listen without any kind of recourse or anything else coming from, all these different places. And you have such a high standard. We went through a lot in the beginning to be able to be on this show. So I appreciate, being here, and thank you for having me. I would love to connect or communicate with any of those leaders out there, even if you just want to I have a free session where we can get together and just kind of talk through maybe some of the things and see if it's a good fit for you and your team. It's not always a good fit, and that's okay. But I would love to connect with them. My website is shellystarks.com, and I'm on all of the social media platforms. So thank you, Deb.
All right. Well, thank you for an amazing conversation. Experience, validation of what we were both doing is so important to those leaders. And I just want to say thank you again and wish you well and much success.
Thank you, Deb. You as well.